Hi, everyone. I'm here with Dr. Steve Purdom as we get ready for our upcoming workshop, Enneagram and Relationships, on July 18th at the South Point Hotel and Casino. This workshop is going to explore how personality types, instinctual subtypes influences the way that we connect and help us better understand communication and conflict, compatibility, and unconscious patterns that often shape our relationships. So, Steve, I know that relationships are the topic that seem to resonate with people the most. I thought this would be a great opportunity to explore some of these ideas a little bit deeper. So, relationships are the most important part of our lives, but they can also be one of the most challenging. Why do you think relationships seem to be so difficult, even with people that we genuinely care about?
I think the thing that makes relationships so difficult, Deirdre, is that each person is extremely complicated and each person has numerous moving parts. And so when you put two individuals together who look at the world through two different lenses, the lenses of their Enneagram type, and then in addition, they have childhood wounding, which comes into play, and they have what are called shadow issues, which are the unconscious parts of each of us that comes into play. And in addition, there's another part of the Enneagram called instinctual subtypes. These are the way we view the world in relationship either to ourselves or one other person or groups of people. And if one of us views the world in what is called the self-preservation instinctual subtype, then we see the world as being about survival, food, clothing, shelter. And in addition, it is first and foremost about one person, ourselves, surviving. But if our partner happens to be what's called a one-on-one type instinctual subtype, then they see the world in terms of an emotionally intense relationship with one other person. And I call the one-on-one Romeo and Juliet. Their relationship with each other was the whole world for them. And that's also pretty much true for modern day people who have a one-on-one instinctual subtype. And then the third option is what is called a social instinctual subtype. And they see that groups provide them with the best chance of being successful and surviving in the world. And so they want to belong to groups. And so if you have a person who sees the world as their survival being only dependent on them, and that is the people who are obsessed with food, clothing, and shelter, married to someone who sees the world as being safer if you are involved in groups, then they're going to have quite a bit of conflict over how to spend their free time.
Wow. You actually touched on something that I was going to ask you next about seeing the world through their lens. Everyone has a different point of view. How does the Enneagram help us understand how two people can experience the exact same thing so differently?
Well, let me explain a little bit about the Enneagram. The Enneagram is a system that's been around for, 50, 60, 70 years and has become fairly widespread in the U.S. and especially so in Las Vegas. The system contends that there are only 9 personality types, and the thing that separates each of those types is their motivation and their fears. And so every event that we see as individuals is seen through the lens of our type and our own motivation. So for the first of these 9 types, type 1, they see the world through the lens of doing the right thing and following the rules. So if they are married to a type 7 who sees the world through the lens of enthusiasm and playfulness and fun-loving and not so rule-based, then the two of them are looking at two totally different environments which are in conflict with one another.
Wow. And then even layering on the instinctual subtype.
Yeah, so if you start out with the Enneagram type, and then you layer on instinctual subtypes, and then you layer on childhood wounding, and then you layer on the parts of each of us that are unconscious, then that's what makes relationships so complicated.
I get that. It sounds complicated. So another question. I think that idea alone can really help people step back because so often in relationships, we can become focused on trying to understand the other person, when in reality, people may simply be experiencing the same situation very differently. So you mentioned that all of us bring in childhood wounding into our relationship. So how do experiences from early life continue to shape the way that we connect with adults, often without realizing it?
Yeah, you're right, is that our childhood wounding might not be obvious to us individually. And I've experienced enough decades that I can comment on how long it lasts. And I would say that childhood wounding lasts forever. Even if you become very conscious and very healthy, then you still have to be careful that it doesn't sneak up on you in your interactions with other people. I can give you some good examples. For myself, my childhood, I felt like I was unprotected by my father and that my mother was less kind than she could have been. So in relationships, I have to be careful not to overly interpret somebody else's behavior through that same lens. So somebody who's just mildly unkind to me might be, I might elevate it to very unkind. And so I might be overly sensitive to that. Or a friend of mine's mother was very critical of her. And so any criticism towards her is perceived as coming from her mother almost directly and is amplified because of that.
Do you think that's amplified even when you have awareness, or if that's when you're completely unaware?
If you're unaware, it for sure is amplified. If you have awareness, it is there and you have the opportunity to step aside from it. I can give you an example for myself.
Hmm.
I was in a situations where someone was acting, a young man was acting out in order to receive attention. Well, when I thought his behavior was inappropriate and it was mildly annoying for me. When I was a young man, I spent a lot of my time seeking attention. So this isn't quite childhood, but it's the same premise is that wounding that we have in childhood or even behavior that we had in our young adulthood that we don't particularly like can be stimulated by somebody else's behavior. Many writers use the expression that they are mirroring behavior of ours that we don't like, and that's certainly true.
Oh, yeah, I agree with that. Why do you think some relationships feel natural and easy while other relationships seem to require so much more effort and understanding?
I have been teaching the Enneagram for 28 years, and I have done a fair amount of couples work. And one of the things I've discovered is that there are types that we can enter into a long term relationship with that are easier for us to get along with. It is a different set for each one of the types. And I don't think we want to take the time to go through all the set. I will go through the set for a type 2. A type 2 will find it easier to have a relationship with a type 1 or a type 3, and that's the numbers on either side of them. And then they will find that it's easier to have a relationship with a type 8 or a type 4. And there's an winded explanation inside of the Enneagram community about that explanation. And then the other thing that I've found is if you marry somebody who is the same instinctual subtype, it makes it much easier for your relationship to work. And that one might actually be the most important one. So if you're both self-pres, then you're both focused on food, clothing, shelter, and there's no argument about it. If
Hmm.
you are both one-on-one, Peter O'Hanrahan uses the phrase, that's a cult of two. And so you're both members of the cult, and that's the only cult you need if you're one-on-one. And then the third one is social, and I have a couple that I'm going to interview at our meeting on July the 18th, and both of them are social, and they belong to like 12 organizations together.
Wow,
And
that's quite
and they
social.
and if either one of them says, "Do you wanna go to this meeting?" The other one says, "Yes." Of
Of course. Yeah.
course, yeah. Why wouldn't I wanna go?
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that makes a big difference. The instinctual subtype does.
Yeah. No, I can see that clear as day. So, also, how do instinctual subtypes influence the way that people seek security and connection and emotional comfort within relationships? You sort of touched on that a little bit already.
I did. Well, for the, self-preservation people, it's food, clothing, and shelter. And so home is really a big deal, and that's the place that they feel most comfortable. It's almost like their cave. And and their pantry will be stocked, and they'll have multiple containers of milk in the refrigerator, or eggs, whatever their common food sources are. And so they will both agree and they will spend their money on groceries. Self-pressed people actually expand out into comfortable furniture and comfortable clothing. And so they both will understand why one of us would want to buy a jacket that is comfortable and keeps us warm. They won't have any difficulty understanding that. Whereas a social person might tend to buy something in the clothing field that is socially acceptable in whatever groups they're attending. For instance, this church, then you're going to buy the Sunday dress or the
Yeah.
Sunday suit
Mm-hmm.
to go there. Once you mismatch them, then the one-on-one person is going to be approaching their partner, wanting attention from that partner. That's where they are invested, is the person they entered into a long-term relationship with. And if that partner is either self-pres or social, they are not going to understand their partner's need for that intense emotional one-on-one relationship with them. And uh, I had a situation where the husband was one-on-one, but the wife was self-pres. And I was interviewing them as in a open meeting, and the husband said, I just can't get enough one-on-one time together. And the wife said, well, we drove over here together in the car. And she's self-pres. And she thought that was adequate to meet his one-on-one need. But that's not exactly what he was looking for.
Yeah.
He was looking for something where both of them could be focused on the relationship. Of course, he's driving the car, so he couldn't actually get that need met. And also, he wants emotional intensity around it, just not a transportation act while they travel to church that day.
That's a great example of that lens that you're talking about. Yeah. This is a question for the workshop, but do you think that the instinctual subtypes ever change the older that you get when you're in a relationship with someone?
No, we actually have all three of them, and they're stacked. And the first one and the second one, we have pretty easy access to, but the third one tends to be used only rarely.
Hmm.
And so if one partner is one-on-one self-pres and the other partner is self-pres one-on-one, you can move around a little bit, and that is better than not having any connectivity. But
Mm-hmm.
if one of the partners is one-on-one first and the other one is social first, but one-on-one last, they cannot see each other. It's just almost impossible. And so I do not think that the instinctual subtypes change during life. I think you can move to the point where you have more access, particularly to the one that is second in the stacking. So if you're stacked self-pres 101 social, then maybe as you mature, you can actually have more access to the one-on-one, maybe to the social, but much less likely. The other thing that I've said about my own personal growth is I have my self-pres needs met. So I don't have any doubts that I'm, going to have food and clothing and shelter.
Mm-hmm.
And so now it frees me up in the sense that I can now look around and say, well, maybe I want to spend a little more time in my one-on-one instinctual subtype since I don't have any fears about whether or not I'm going to be fed and clothed and sheltered. So now maybe I'll spend more time looking at the advantages that can come to me from a one-on-one relationship with another person.
Oh,
And
wow,
that
that totally makes sense.
yeah.
And that what?
Yeah, and that has happened to me personally,
Yeah.
for certain.
What I find so interesting about all of this is the idea that so much of what influences our relationships seem to be happening beneath the surface in ways that people are not even often aware of. You talk about unconscious patterns and parts of ourselves that we're not always aware of. How do these unconscious parts of our personality begin affecting relationships in ways that we may not recognize?
That is one of the most complicated parts of human psychology, and I have read Robert Johnson, who's written multiple books, and James Hollis, who's written multiple books, numerous people. Romancing the Shadow. I've forgotten the lady's name who wrote that right off the top of my head, but Robert Bly has written a book he calls The Little Book of the Shadow. But all of these people have tried to put this in writing in a way that the rest of us can understand it, but it's very complicated. And when I share it with other people, it's hard for them to see it initially. But there are some ways to do this. And since I've been doing this for 28 years, hopefully I have gotten better at it. And so my suggestions are, there's a quote from Carl Jung, who is the originator of the term shadow. And what he means by shadow is parts of ourselves that are lying in the unconscious part of our psychology. The conscious part is, I am Steve Purdom. I am hardworking. I'm a good student. I want to be successful. And there's all that. The unconscious part of me contains all sorts of things. Some of them I don't like. A lot of them I don't like. And so what I do is I don't let them come to the surface. And I have been socialized by our society so that I come to any new relationship with a persona of Steve Purdom, hardworking, like success, image conscious, and numerous other things. And so that's what I present. But lying beneath the surface in my psychology are other things that get triggered sometimes. And when they get triggered, then I might be sad or unhappy or angry, or in some cases, I might feel joy. And so I could have in my unconscious fear that people will expose me because I am arrogant. And so if somebody calls me out for being arrogant, then I might be angry with them. But if you understand that that fear of arrogance belongs to you, and that your emotional reactivity to the person who suggests that you are arrogant belongs to you, you have a chance at resolving it. And I put this on our website 17 years ago, on your emotional reactivity. And Robert Johnson, he's the author of a book called Owning Your Shadow. And he says in the book that he writes very concisely, all affect is interior. Well, I only added one word to that. All emotional affect is interior. And so whenever we have this feeling of emotional reactivity, it belongs to us. And what Carl Jung said is that anything that irritates us about someone else is an opportunity to understand ourselves better. And that's a paraphrase of what he said. And so if someone irritates me, then what I need to do is to look at the source of that irritation. And what I will find is, if they have said something about me that I object to strongly, then what has happened is that is actually a part of me that I have disowned. So I use arrogance as the first example. If I am emotionally irritated by someone suggesting that I'm arrogant, then it means that arrogance is in my unconscious part, and I need to elevate the fact that I am arrogant in some situations and own that. And if I bring it to consciousness and I own it, then when the next person that says to me that I'm arrogant will not irritate me. It goes away. Let me give you one other example. Type 2s in the Enneagram world base their value in society and their reason for living on that they are unselfish and giving to other people. If you suggest to a type 2 that they are selfish, they will not be your friend for very long unless they are a very self-aware person. And this creates an issue for type 2 Enneagram type, in that if they cannot balance that they are unselfish, but at times selfish, then they cannot balance giving to other people and caring for themselves. And so it is in their best interest to acknowledge that they need to be unselfish, which is great and very much appreciated by the rest of us, but they also need to be self-caring, which involves some degree of selfishness on their part. They need to take care of themselves. They need to have a spa day. They need to have a day off at home, some way of taking care of themselves. In the place that you will find people in which this is detrimental are nurses.
Hmm.
Nurses give, 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 give. Burnout amongst nurses is very high. And
Yes.
so they will actually leave the profession after a while because they don't know what to do with that. And the reason is they don't allow themselves to self-care. They feel that they're one-dimensional, giving, 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 but they're not. They are both giving and they also are selfish in terms of taking care of themselves. And they need both of those to be a balanced human being and to tolerate their profession.
Definitely. In the workshop, do you go over how to go through that process of getting to the source for understanding your shadow and recognizing that with each of the types?
Yes, in this workshop, I will mention it in terms of relationship. If your husband or wife irritates you, then you need to look inside of yourself and see what about their comment, their behavior is irritating you. So, if you had a critical parent and your wife says that you're messy and you need to do a better job of, you know, uh, putting your clothes away, put them in the dirty clothes hamper and everything, and you have a strong emotional reaction to it, you need to stop and say, where's that emotional reaction coming from? Because it is coming from inside of me.
Hmm.
All right. So then the emotional part of that is that my mother, maybe both parents, were always critical of me. And I'm over interpreting my wife's suggestion to be a little neater around the house as a repeat of the emotional wounding that I received as a child. And so the process is anytime that I have emotion reactivity, I stop and look for it inside of myself. And I have this expression, it says that the person who triggered that response exits stage right. They are
Hmm.
no longer a part of this discussion. Now that this is, we were talking earlier about how complicated relationships are. Well, what if you're married to somebody who's always critical? Well, you made a mistake.
Yeah.
I hate to tell you,
Yeah.
because you would think that somebody who has experienced a childhood wounding from a critical parent would not enter into a relationship that somebody's uh, uh, behavior on a daily basis is one of criticism. So hopefully that doesn't happen. But almost all of us at some time or another will have some degree of criticism for our closest relationship. And that's the one I'm talking about is some degree. Yeah, you need to put your clothes in the dirty hamper. You can at least get to that part. Well, that sort of fairly low level criticism is might set off a very strong emotional reaction in somebody who has experienced critical parents, and that's the part that they need to deal with personally.
Yeah. 100%. I know this is exactly the kind of material that we're going to be exploring much more deeply during the workshop on July 18th, which I think will give people an opportunity to better understand both themselves and the people closest to them. One of the ideas that stood out in your outline was that our emotional reactions belong to us first. And you actually just mentioned this. Can you talk about why understanding our own emotional response is such an important part of healthier relationships? I know you just talked about that. Is if there's anything else you want to add to that?
No, in the workshop, I'm going to concentrate on instinctual subtypes and types and how they bump into each other. And I will, in the process of doing that, the subject of unconscious issues will come up. There's just no way. I mean, when you're living with someone 24/7, whatever emotional issues you're bringing with you from childhood will present themselves, or if you have buried behavior that you didn't think was appropriate from society's point of view, then that may well come up. So I will discuss those. The biggest issue for all of us, whether we're talking about relationships such as marriage or just friendships or the lady at the grocery store that checks us out, the biggest issue for us is that if they trigger our emotional reactivity, the emotional activity belongs to us. And we're not doing this for their benefit, we're doing it for our own benefit. As Carl Jung said, what irritates us about others leads to a better understanding of ourselves. And so when I'm irritated, I see it as an opportunity to go inside of myself and say, where is this coming from? Why was I triggered? Another Robert Johnson quote. He said that when we are triggered, is that what we should do is like the matador bullfighter. Is we have a cape and we let the charge of the emotional activity just pass us by. And so we don't try to grab the bull and stop the bull. We let the bull go through the cape and pass us by. Well, if you can do that, if you can not react to whatever the perceived trigger is, then you have an opportunity to use that time to explore what your own subconscious is made up of and to bring it to consciousness, and frequently bringing that unconscious to where you are aware of it brings energy and opportunities into your life. And so the thing I would say, if you can walk away from this video with, if someone triggers your emotional reactivity, the emotional reactivity belongs to you. That is the first step on improving your relationships and understanding yourself, and it opens up just all sorts of doors for you. So that one is the biggest one. It's one of the hardest things for all of us to do.
Yeah, I was going to say, oh, go ahead. You what?
You didn't make me angry. You triggered something that was already inside of me that makes me angry. And that anger belongs to me. I don't doesn't matter what you said. The anger belongs to me.
Do you think one of the most challenging parts is getting through the defensiveness
For
of
sure.
that? Yeah.
What most of us do is blame someone else.
Mhm.
And the problem with that, it gets in the way, it's a way of defending against whatever the insult was, the perceived insult. And it gets in the way of us resolving the actual issue, which is something inside of us.
Yes. That was going to be my follow-up question.
It is so complicated, and
Yeah.
it is absolutely the way we are built. Every human being I've talked to does the same thing. Somebody hurt my feelings. Nope. They said something that triggered a feeling inside of myself that is painful.
Hmm.
But they didn't hurt my feelings. The pain was already there, but I hadn't made it. It's not conscious. I'm not aware of it. And so I blamed it on somebody else. Somebody made me angry. No, the anger was already inside of myself. You actually heard this one. Somebody said in front of both of us that somebody else's behavior made them feel shame.
Hmm.
Um, and I have since suggested kindly to that person that the shame belongs to them. We could all agree, perhaps, that the behavior she was looking at from this other person was not their best day, but it doesn't matter. That person exits right, stage right, and you're left with, why do I feel shame
Yeah.
over this event?
Yeah. I think there's an author, his name is Les Brown. He said, it's hard to see the big picture when you're living in the frame. So I wonder when we don't have that separation between us and the reactivity, why that's probably really challenging.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's a great analogy. Yeah, we're caught in the frame, and there's a much bigger picture out there, and that picture includes understanding that we have unconscious feelings and issues that we're just not aware of, and so we limit ourselves to this frame. And as you said earlier, we use that limitation to defend ourselves. We're a little bit afraid, we're a lot afraid of what we're going to find if we allow the unconscious part of who we are come to the surface.
Yeah.
All of us have some degrees of behavior or thoughts about things that would not be in our best interest. And what happens is, if you don't come to the resolution that you are made up of both of these things, then you will either project them onto other people. That person is bad, that person is bad, that person is bad, or you will act them out in behavior that is inappropriate.
Yeah. And that's how having that awareness of even knowing that there is a shadow and that even exists. Otherwise, you're too inside of it to understand
You're
what's
too
what.
inside of the frame to understand.
Yes. So there's something else I wanted to bring up too. I think it's really interesting about the perspective that really shifts our attention away from trying to change another person and brings us back to understanding ourselves first. I know you've mentioned Robert Johnson a few times today, which I think he's fantastic. The quote where you talked about when something impacts us emotionally, What's been triggered already exists within us, and understanding that conflicts becomes our own responsibility. Is there anything else that you would like to add to that?
Recognizing Carl Jung's quote, what irritates us about others leads to a better understanding of ourselves. And then to tie that to Robert Johnson's is all emotional affect is interior. I think if you absorb those two things, then you have a real chance, a real opportunity to turn what you perceive as a negative because of your emotional reactivity to it into a positive. My example of the young man who was seeking attention. Well,
Yeah.
okay, how is it that I've gotten to this age and not resolved that for myself? Well, he brought it back to me, and so I get another chance.
Mhm.
And I'm even in discussing it this morning, I'm obviously getting closer and closer to having resolution to it because I can talk about it and have a chuckle as opposed to having some sort of emotional reactivity to it. And my emotional reactivity was pretty low even when it happened in real time.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's you live in a different place. It is not in our best interest to overreact to other people. It is better, as Robert Johnson said, to let the energy and the threat that you perceive from the bull go through the cape,
Mhm.
not touch you, not injure you, and move on.
Yeah.
And at the same time, if we are capable of seeing all of this, seeing why our reactivity is there, then we become calm. We become not emotionally reactive. So I can just make a rational decision about how I'm going to deal with it. It's not being influenced by something that happened when I was 12 years old.
Yeah.
It's happening right between me and this other person in this moment.
Yeah. You're taking steps doing something that you have control over. So, which brings me to my next question. Many people naturally fall into the trap of trying to change someone that they love. Why do you think it is important to understand that we cannot do another person's inner work for them?
Well, Dr. James Hollis, who I mentioned earlier, said that it was a sad day in his life when he realized that his wife could not cure his childhood wounding. He had been counting on that.
My gosh, it's
Yeah,
funny.
and I would say for myself, it's, been the last 20 years, maybe even less than that, that I've realized that there's nobody who can resolve my problem. Therapists can help me resolve my problem. They are not emotionally involved in the situation, hopefully, and they have expertise. And one of my therapists would walk me back into my early childhood experiences, and we did this once a week for years. And so she could help me do that. Your partner can't do that. First of all, they don't have the professional skill sets. Secondly, they're an interested party in the relationship, and so they bring their own reactivity to it. And so they just cannot do it. It is impossible. But what they can do is they can be compassionate, they can be kind, they can be loving, they can be supportive, and they can provide a safe space without their judgment for you to do your own healing.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, if somebody offered me that deal,
Mhm.
if you will enter in a relationship to me, I will be compassionate and kind and loving and supportive and non-judgmental. I'd take it. That's that's a good relationship. If I tried to add to that, but I want you to heal me, that ruins the relationship. That's not part of the deal. It's just an impossibility for um, you know partners to heal each other.
Okay, well, and I agree with you 100%. So, if healthy relationships are not about fixing one another, what do healthy relationships actually require from us individually?
Well, all those things I just mentioned,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
yeah, I mean that's a good deal.
yeah, yeah.
And then, as all of us have realized, is there's a lot more to a relation. There's a lot of detail work in a relationship. There's food, clothing, shelter, self-pres needs. There's
Mhm.
emotional interactions, one-on-one type people. And then partners help us to engage in the society. So there's the social instinctual behavior also. And so they serve all those roles. And so you can be partners in life, and then on top of that, you can do the things that I mentioned, which is gives your partner a chance to heal their own wounding. I mean, a partner that goes to work every day and provides for the family and takes care of the house and raises children. These are all worthwhile tasks in a relationship. And unfortunately, sometimes we get preoccupied with them. And then they can be compassionate and kind and loving and supportive and provide safe space and uh, listen to if you come to them with, I have this wounding and would you just hear me out? They can do
Mhm.
that occasionally.
Yeah. And also even knowing that this is a wound. Some people may not even know what a childhood wounding is or how to identify, oh, this is a childhood wound. This is not something that belongs to the other person.
Right. And
Yeah.
as I said early on, recognizing that you're in your wounding, that there is this unconscious part of your psychology that is going on every day of your life is the first step.
If someone listening wanted to better understand one thing about themselves that could positively impact all of their relationships, where would you encourage them to begin?
I would encourage them to begin with the Enneagram as opposed to shadow. The Enneagram can be learned in a fairly short period of time, and people will embrace it if you present it in a non judgmental way. I taught a introductory class in May to 13 people, and 8 of those people are coming to a class that we're going to teach in July. And they did not know anything about the Enneagram when they came to the class. So that was really a fun thing for me to do. But if they can learn that in a short period of time, and all of a sudden they realize their partner is looking at the world through a different lens. And that's eye opening.
Hmm.
There's a couple who I met in May and they're coming in July. She's a type 1. She has rules and regulations. And he's a type 5. And fives are more interested in knowledge and information and not very interested at all in rules and regulation. But I'm going to talk to them about this at the July meeting. But the 5 will just be quiet and kind of go their own way and not get in conflict with the one and maybe try to accommodate the one's rules. What would might help their relationship is if the one understands that she is addicted to the rules in order to keep herself safe, that she might could begin to say, well, maybe I'm not unsafe. Maybe I'm already safe and maybe I can turn loose some of these rules. And so the Enneagram itself, just knowing that your partner is looking at a different behavior, different rules. I mentioned the type 5. The type 5 are the smart people, the professors, to use the word, but I changed the word, the technology uh, people who love details and knowledge about things.
Hmm.
And they're not very emotional people and they're not very relationship based.
Hmm.
Okay, in another group of mine, there was a 7 who is very outgoing and very relationship based, and they were married. And she said that at one time she didn't understand uh, his not needing relationships the way she does. But now she understands that he's a quiet, introverted person who is in their head. And so his not needing the relationship is not a rejection of her. It's just how he sees the world. He sees a more information based world. She sees a more relationship based world. And so they're looking at it differently. So now that she understands that, she just doesn't bother her anymore. She's not emotionally reactive to it. And so she can approach him seeking that relationship time. He is aware that it's important to her because of their study of the Enneagram. And so he can make the effort to give her more relationship based time.
Hmm.
And so it makes, if you study this couple I mentioned that's brand new to the Enneagram, in these 2 meetings, they're going to move huge steps towards understanding their relationship from where they are right now. They've been together for 15 years. And so they obviously are managing the relationship and they seem pretty comfortable in the relationship, but they're going to have an understanding of what they've been doing intuitively after studying the Enneagram in 2 meetings.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
amazing.
It is amazing.
Like the entryway of having that awareness and acceptance of
Yeah.
yourself and other people. That's why I think this, go ahead, that,
And it's very understandable. The Enneagram is simple compared to shadow work.
Yes. Oh,
For
yeah.
childhood wounding. It's very straightforward. There's only 9 types. Each of them has their own motivation. Each of them has their own fears. And so they're looking at 1/9 of the reality. And we tend to marry people who are looking at a different reality. It kind of supplements what we're seeing, and we intuitively do that. And when you give them a framework to understand what their partner is seeing, then all of a sudden the relationship changes.
Oh, yeah. Mhm.
It's dramatic.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
instinctual subtypes would be the second thing I would teach them. And for the same reason, knowing your partner is self-present, you're one-on-one, changes your understanding, and it also can get rid of judgment in the relationship. And one of my little expressions is that understanding negates judgment. And
Yeah.
I think that's true.
I think it's true. I know that's true. Doesn't make it easy, but you have a tool that you can it's everyday life tool. It's something that you can really apply to yourself as an individual, but yeah, really understand your partner in a completely different way.
Yeah. E
Yeah.
every person I meet, I look at them and try to understand, uh, how, uh, why it is that they're relating to me in this way.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, and so that's totally different in terms instead of trying to say, "Why don't they relate to me the way I relate to them?"
Yeah.
Because they're a different person than I am.
Yeah. And when you apply the Enneagram, it really does lead you to an answer.
It does lead you to an answer.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to share some of these ideas because I think that conversations like this really help people begin to understand how much deeper relationships really are when we apply the Enneagram and especially instinctual subtypes. For anyone interested in this work and to understand it more deeply, we hope that you will join us on July 18th at the South Point Hotel and Casino. We have all of our information on our website, www.enneagramlasvegas.com. But registration will begin at 8:30 a.m. The workshop begins at 9 a.m. Enneagram Las Vegas will be providing coffee and lunch, and Nevada therapists and counselors will receive 3 CEUs for this event. We hope you can join us.
Look forward to seeing you on
Great.
July the 18th.
Absolutely. Thanks again, Steve.